Last night, Elon Musk confirmed what I first uncovered last summer during some CVPR talks by Tesla AI engineers, and that is that Tesla is doing generative video akin to what OpenAI Sora is doing. So what are the latest developments? What could the consequences be? And what might Tesla have been up to during the past year? Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. First of all, I'm going to point out my shirt, which is FSD Beta Tester here. You can get that in the merch store, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. I figured that was a pretty reasonable shirt to wear today. But what I'm going to do is jump into Elon Musk's comments, and they were to my video, so thank you, Elon, for responding to that. And if you haven't seen my video, I'll leave a link to it up here, and I will also leave a link to all of these videos in the description, so it's very easy for you to click on them and watch them. So I'm going to reference Ashok Eluswamy's talk from CVPR last summer, and also Phil Dewan's CVPR talk from last summer as well. I'm going to pull out a few minutes from these videos and discuss them again because they show where Tesla's research had gotten them to a year ago with what is now full self-driving version 12, which people like Omar are driving in the wild, and hopefully the rest of us will get to drive soon. But first, let's take a look at X and what Elon talked about. So my post here was, what does OpenAI Sora, which if you don't know is a generative video model, which is just blowing everyone's mind, including mine. It's incredible looking stuff. Anyway, what does OpenAI Sora have to do with Tesla's full self-driving version 12? Turns out a lot. AI Bombshell confirms Tesla's thesis, and the Tesla thesis that I was talking about in the title. Yeah, I always overhype the titles a little. You got to get people to click on them. But basically that thesis was that generative video is possible and also quite useful. So that was the point of the video that I did, and I would certainly recommend watching it. It goes into a lot more detail. But anyway, Elon responded to that. Tesla has been able to do real-world video generation with accurate physics for about a year, which was exactly what I said in my video. I suspected it was somewhere around a year ago that they got to this point. That was based on Walter Isaacson's book, and also the fact that in June they presented this research, which meant that it needed to be, pretty reasonably done by somewhere in the February or March of 2023 timeframe. Just, just reasonable guesses. But anyway, I was like, cool, I was dead on about that. Anyway, he said it wasn't super interesting because all the training data came from the cars, so it just looks like video from a Tesla, albeit with a dynamically generated, not remembered world. So one word to call out here is he says it wasn't super interesting, which is really, we'll touch on that later. I'm just going to get back to that. But anyway, he also then responded to himself and said, we have been short on training compute for FSD, so haven't trained with other videos, but certainly could. We'll do it later this year when we have some spare capacity. So again, they're building out a really big compute cluster. And of course, they've been slammed with FSD training requests. So obviously that compute is going towards direct FSD training. What he's talking about here is that they might be able to ingest other video in the future and actually see what they can come up with in terms of generative video, just like OpenAI Sora. So that was, again, what I talked about in this video up here, which I suspected. And I think it's really cool that, and this is a terrible view. Let me move this. There we go. Move it forward a little bit so that it looks a little bit better than that. But anyway, this is what I called out in the video. I said I suspected that they had the ability to do this. It's just that visually it's not very impressive because that wasn't the point of what they were doing. Did you know that your personal data is being bought and sold online right now? Yes, behind your back, data brokers are busy passing your data around for profit, and this exposes us all to potential harassment, doxing, phishing scams, and even devastating identity theft. But you and I have a right to stay private and protect our personal data. I know I need to protect my online data and privacy rights, but I'm so busy, and frankly, I wouldn't even know where to start. That's where Delete Me, today's sponsor, comes in. Delete Me takes the work out of protecting your online presence by removing you from hundreds of data brokers all year long. It's totally hands-off, so you don't have to do a thing after you sign up, which is great for me and my busy life. Delete Me goes out and finds sites that have your personal data like phone numbers, addresses, email addresses, and so on, and alerts the broker that you wish to have your data removed from their site. And if there's a particular custom removal request you need, just let Delete Me know and it'll take care of that too. Delete Me sends you a privacy report in 7 days after you sign up, letting you know what sites had your data and what has been protected. Better yet, Delete Me is a US-based company and does all the work in-house. And Delete Me will monitor sites all year long and repeat the removal request as needed. I also love how simple Delete Me is to use. You submit your info, experts search for it online, requests are made to those sites to remove your data, and Delete Me sends you a detailed report in 7 days. And it keeps working all year, protecting you from anyone trying trying to reacquire your data. Be sure to click my link in the description to get 20% off any consumer data protection plan and start feeling safer right now. Thanks to Delete Me for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to click my link in the description to get 20% off any consumer data protection plan. And now let's get back to it. And then my response to Elon, that will be fun to see. What does FSD dream of when it's not driving? Thinking about that. I'm thinking of Google's DeepMind's deep dream from way back in 2015 or so when they started doing this stuff. And you started at that point to see what the future might look like. Crazy what's happened in the past 9 years. But anyway, that's the kind of thing. So we could have FSD deep dreaming. Kind of a joke because that's not what they're going to do. And so I continued saying, I know it'd be a totally different training run on different data, not days, but still fun to imagine. Plus this could give Grok, and by that I mean XAI, a fantastic leg up in the competition if Tesla would license the neural network stack to them. So many possibilities. So next I'm going to show a clip from my video from last summer talking about Ashok's talk. I will also leave a link to my video about Phil's talk. Somewhere around 33 minutes is where you want to look at that. But in order to keep this video from not getting super stretched out, and they kind of repeat some of the information. And so I'm just going to show Ashok's talk here and my response to it. So let's watch this clip together, and then we'll talk about the consequences of that and Elon's posts.
So that's why we are working on learning a more general world model that can really just represent arbitrary things. So in this case, what we do is we have a neural network that can be conditioned on the past or other things to predict the future. And obviously, everyone has wanted to work on this forever. And I think with the recent rise in generative models like transformers, diffusion, etc., we finally have a shot at it. So what you're seeing here is purely generated video sequences given the past.
Okay, so I want to stop there. That's like a really, really important part here. Generated sequences. So these sequences that you're watching right now, and again, sorry that the quality is really, really poor here, but these roads and these lights and these trees and these cars around it, none of that stuff is real. This is just the dream, the hallucination of the FSD beta system. And that's the beauty of this world model. You can basically give it what's happened before. So you can give it a real world scene and you can say, here's your car driving through it. And then you just take away the future of it. And you say, now what's going to happen? And it will fill this stuff in and continue to generate this. Now, I'm sure a lot of people have seen this with, recent advances in like video, AI generated video and stuff, where it's able to infill things. Actually, you can do it for still frames too. But in video, you can see it infilling, and over time it gets worse and worse and worse, right? It starts to stray off of the reality. But at least for a few seconds here, the vehicle is able to predict what the future is going to look like from the past.
Videos, the network predicts some sample from the future, hopefully the most likely sample. And you can see that it is being predicted not just for one camera, but it predicts all the 8 cameras around the car jointly. And you can see how the car colors are consistent across the cameras. The motion of objects is consistent in 3D, even though we have not explicitly asked it to do anything in 3D or not even baked in any 3D priors.
Okay, so that's important too. They haven't told this thing the world is 3-dimensional. It's learned that. So that's a really, really crucial thing, right? You can imagine it like a baby or something, right? The baby doesn't pop out and just know it's a 3-dimensional world. The baby, he or she or whoever, has to learn that it's a 3D world. It's that kind of a thing where you have to actually have the experience to build a world model as a human being. That's what the computer is doing right now too. So it's not a trivial thing that they haven't told this is a 3-dimensional world, and that it has to figure that out on its own. That is actually crucial information here.
The network understanding depth and motion on its own without us informing it of so. And since this is all just predicting future, RGB values, the ontology is quite general. You can throw any video clip from driving or from YouTube or from your own phone. Anything can be used to train this general dynamics model of the world.
Okay, so that's a really interesting little point there. Is Tesla eventually going to create a generate your own thing where you can take a YouTube clip or take some stuff that you've filmed in your camera and actually generate more in a scene? That would actually be a very cool little product if they make it. So we will see what happens with that. But that was a really interesting aside that he made, and I thought it was worth just calling that out and mentioning the fact that we might eventually have an app that will allow us to auto-generate some stuff based on video or something that we already have.
Additionally, it can also be action conditioned. We can show a few examples. So here on the left side, the car is driving in the lane, and we're asking it to, okay, just keep in this lane and keep driving. And then, like I said earlier, the car is able to, or the model is able to predict all of this geometry flow by very nicely and understands 3D. On the right here, we're asking it to change lanes to the right side. Maybe we'll go back and play it again. So on the left, it's just going straight. And we ask it to go straight, the model goes straight. And then on the right side, we ask it to make a lane change, and it makes a lane change. And the past context is the same for both of these outputs. So given the same past, and when we ask it for different futures, the model is able to produce or like imagine different futures.
So again, this is really, really interesting. You can see the car actually generating the images of the car moving over. I'm sure IMU information and things like that can be generated as well. Semantics can be generated. So it generates whatever it needs to do to make itself go to the right or stay straight or something. And really interestingly, they say that what they can do is say go straight or take a right or something, which makes me wonder whether they've got a clip model or something embedded in this where they're actually able to associate what's going on with text. That would be really, really interesting if they're doing that. Not something that anybody's talked about, but it is something that they're probably going to have to do, at least with Optimus, if not with the car, for it to interact with human beings, because we like to talk to things. So clip is just, don't worry about the details of it, but basically it allows you to go from text to images, text to other things. It's a kind of an integration of text with other modalities. And so what I'm imagining here is that they're actually putting in a text input, which is continue driving straight or something like that, which means it has to be able to interpret that text and then utilize that to drive through the scene. So if that is indeed what they're doing and they're using clip or something like it to do that, that is super, super cool.
This is super powerful because, now you have essentially a neural network simulator that can simulate different futures based on different actions. And unlike a traditional game simulator, this is way more powerful because it can, represent things that are very hard to describe in an explicit system.
Okay, so again, sorry for breaking this all up, but explicitly describe, if you think about how you would describe a scene like this, and again, sorry, the resolution's bad, but just imagine a regular scene. It's not just like there's a car there, there's a road there. How do you describe that in detail that a regular computer would understand? What he's saying here is that the vehicle, this system is able to learn on its own without having to be given labels, without having to be told all of these things a priori. It's able to figure it out.
I'll show a few more examples, but then it is super powerful, and also the motion, the intention, and then the natural behavior of other objects such as vehicles is very hard to represent explicitly, but in this world it's very easy to represent.
So the import here is that you don't have to describe a scene anymore for this thing to learn about it. That's really, really important. And as Ashok says a little bit later in that video clip, he is personally amazed at how well this works. So even he is sort of blown away that this is working as well as it is. All right, so there you have it. That was from the end of June of last year of 2023. First of all, I have to give myself a little pat on the back because I feel like I mean, obviously I'm just talking about what Ashok's talking about here, so I'm not generating anything of my own, but I feel like I was fairly good about describing exactly what was going on. And if we look at Sora and if we look at the research paper, we can see that they're doing a lot of the same things that Ashok and then I am actually talking about at this point, which is using past priors, in other words, past video, to predict future, which is one of the things that Sora can do, but also looking at clip embedding and the potential of using transformers in conjunction with diffusion models and things. And Elon Musk last year had talked about how they were potentially using diffusion models, moving away from transformers, blending transformers with other modalities in order for Tesla full self-driving to learn how to drive. So lots of really, really interesting little nuances here, and the fact that Tesla's been doing this for a long time. Now, obviously, OpenAI didn't just pop out Sora yesterday. They've been working on this for a long time as well. And of course, we have Gemini Pro, which is also able to do things, and I haven't even had a chance to talk about that yet. There's just so much stuff happening with AI and vision and all of that kind of stuff right now. But the long and short of this is that Tesla has been able to do this outfilling. In other words, through time, if you give it a couple of seconds of video and you tell it what you want it to do, it will generate future video. It looks boring because it just looks like what you would see out of your cameras in your car, but this is fundamentally amazing. It's not cinematography because that's not the point of it, but it's the car is able to see the three-dimensional world and imagine the three-dimensional world into the future. And that's the critical thing to understand here. This is just amazing stuff going on, and it's not going on today. It didn't just happen today. It's been going on for at least a year at this point. And Full Self-Driving 12, as soon as we get it someday, is going to take advantage of that and is taking advantage of that. So the few people who are able to drive it right now, one of the reasons why this thing seems to drive like a human is because what we humans do is we have a three-dimensional representation of the world in our heads. And obviously, as we walk around, we use that. But also when we drive, we use that. We have an idea of speeds, of where things are, of how the world actually operates. And that is critically important to how we interact with the world. And it's also critically important for a vehicle to operate in the world. And it's also critically important for a robot, a humanoid robot, to operate in the world. And a quick little aside here, Herbert Ong, Scott Walter, Cern Basher, and I have formed a company, Human Bots. And what we do is we consult with companies who are interested in integrating humanoid type bots into their factories, retail stores, whatever it is. We will help you figure out the best path forward, which companies to talk to, all of that kind of stuff. If you're interested, definitely contact me. My contact info is in the description below. Anyway, let's get back to Elon Musk's posts and, think through them again after watching that part of that talk that Ashok did. Tesla has been able to do real-world video generation with accurate physics for about a year. Obviously, that's what we have. We just saw that. That was, not a year ago in terms of the presentation, but a year ago in terms of the research. It wasn't super interesting because all the training data came from cars, so it just looks like video from a Tesla, albeit with a dynamically generated, not remembered world. As I said, the video is not particularly interesting looking. It just looks like the video cameras out of the car, and, they're not the most interesting cameras in the world, and especially because I think those were hardware 3 cameras, so they're not even particularly high quality. So it doesn't have the cinema look, the beauty of Sora, but it's doing the same thing that Sora is, dynamically generating, not remembering the world. So in other words, it's not just looking at the world and recreating what it's already seen, it's projecting into the future. So that's the important part here. And then let's look at this first part of this second paragraph. It wasn't super interesting. So wasn't is an interesting term. Does that mean that it is super interesting now? Does it mean that they've gone away from that and they're not using that anymore? Is that just something that he just wrote, right? He was saying a year ago it wasn't that interesting. I don't know. It's possible that they have moved on to other things and haven't really focused on that sort of future video generation because it's not particularly important to what they're doing, right? The world model and creating the three-dimensional world is important, and reacting to the world is super important. And you could say that projecting what the future might look like is also important, but it might not be. So they might have, diverged away from that research path and just not been that interested in it. It could just be a trick of language that he used a word that's a little nebulous there. That's also a possibility. It's also possible that they now have much more interesting video coming out as well. So maybe between hardware 4 and more time, they've been able to create video that looks much more interesting into the future. And also how long into the future. At the time that Ashok and Phil presented at CVPR 2023, it looked like it was like 1 or 2 seconds. So it was a very short amount of time. But with the intervening year in between, maybe they've been able to go on to 15, 20, 30 seconds. If they can get it imagining that far into the future, that's where my big issue with full self-driving, the intermediate planning, that 20 to 30 second range, might be taken care of. If it can actually think its way into the future, 20 to 30 seconds, that's all it really needs. It doesn't have to go much further than that, but that would allow the car to drive in a much more human manner if it's able to imagine outcomes, can kind of do a Monte Carlo search of the future and project out different outcomes in three-dimensional space, sort of like what we do in complicated situations. Like, do I have to drive around this car? Are there cars coming the other direction? Some big, UPS truck is parked in the road and you're like, do I go around the thing? Are there cars coming towards me? Could there be cars? Is there a bend in the road? Lots of different things go through your mind in complicated driving situations. And this is exactly what the car could do. It could do better planning like that if it's able to model out the futures and it's able to, Monte Carlo search, it's able to roll the dice and look at multiple different futures and model out what they could look like in three-dimensional space over the 10, 15, 20 second range. So we'll see what happens with that. Again, could just be a trick of the language, and he might just be using the word wasn't a little nebulously, and maybe it should be isn't. I don't know. But it also could be that they're able to generate much more interesting and useful video now, or they've just, again, diverged away from it. But I think not, given his second post here, which is, we have been short on training compute for full self-driving, so haven't trained with other video, but certainly could. Other video being not full self-driving video, so things like YouTube videos and such like. And he says, we'll do it later this year when we have some spare capacity. So that's really cool to see that they think they're going to have enough headroom in terms of spare capacity for compute that they'll be able to turn to doing other projects at that time. That's really interesting. But also interestingly, this could indicate that Tesla could compete with the likes of OpenAI and Google DeepMind in terms of generative video if they so chose. And so the consequences are not just to full self-driving, but potentially to a broader audience of people looking for generative video. And of course, the idea of spare compute right here means that Elon and the engineers might be thinking that they're getting pretty close to solving full self-driving. If they're not throwing every single compute cycle at full self-driving training, they might have a roadmap to where they think they're going to get pretty close to solving it by the end of this year. So that's also a very, very interesting data point, and I can't wait to see if that actually comes to pass. And then finally, let's talk about one of Elon's other companies, X.AI, and how they might be able to leverage this stuff. So Tesla does not have the spare compute right now, but maybe X.AI does have that. And Tesla and X.AI could work out some sort of data licensing, neural network training licensing deal where what Tesla could do is give them their neural network stack to be used to do generative video training and see where it goes and see if they can actually compete with OpenAI and kind of bootstrap themselves very, very rapidly to be able to produce generative video within the next couple of months that is on the order of what OpenAI is doing, because the stack that Tesla has could be reworked to do something like that, it seems like relatively easily. And then in turn, we could get what everyone has suspected and Elon has kind of hinted at, and that is that Teslas are going to get Grok, and Teslas will be able to utilize a lot of what X.AI is working on. So that would be a really, really nice kind of formalized agreement between the two companies. Maybe that exists already. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, XAI is a private company, so they can do whatever they want, but I think Tesla as a public company might have a fiduciary duty to talk to us shareholders and tell us that they have an agreement with XAI, but maybe they also don't. So maybe there's a backroom deal already. In fact, I'm sure there is, but whether it's formalized and in writing and all that stuff, I don't know. But if Tesla gave XAI this stack and XAI kind of trimmed out the stuff about full self-driving, and just made it only about generating video, they could probably bootstrap within a couple of months, 2 to 3 months, maybe 4 months, because they're going to have to do training runs and stuff. But they could probably get some sort of generative video coming out relatively quickly. And it's always possible that, because this was a year old before XAI, actually right around the time XAI came into existence around April of last year, this thing would have been available. So it's quite possible that XAI has already had access to this, and we might see something come out very, very soon from XAI. And I don't know what they would call it. I don't know if it'd be Grok Video or whatever, but anyway, we might see something really, really soon if they've been working on it in the back for a while now. All right, so that's what I've got for you today. Things are starting to coalesce from over a year ago, and things that I talked about last year and said, wow, this is really cool and it would be amazing to see where this could go. Well, we're starting to see where it could go. So super fascinating, and gosh, what is going to be the case in another 12 months? I don't even know. It's absolutely crazy how fast all of this stuff is going. Definitely let me know in the comments what you think, what you project the future might look like, when full self-driving is going to be, sort of complete. I know that's never going to actually happen, but better than humans in a significant way. How's that? When is it going to get to that? Could it be by the end of the year? That would be really amazing if that does happen. And finally, a big thanks once again to Delete Me for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to check out my link in the description to get 20% off any consumer data protection plan, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.